My name is Sajah Popham, and I live in the Pacific Northwest, Washington State, with my wife and my two sonny boys. And we live out on a farm here, raise a lot of animals, and grow a lot of food out here, and make spagyrics, and teach, and see clients, and keep pretty busy out here. And I'm very honored and excited to be a part of IHS again this year. Like I said, I've been coming to this conference for many, many years, and my wife and I were talking about it the other day, and just talking about how wonderful the International Herb Symposium really is because of the incredible teachers that come out, the content, the depth, the knowledge, the community around it. It's just a really wonderful opportunity to connect with just the herbal community and how people really conglomerate there from all around the world, and how special that is. And it's a real honor to be able to be a part of it and to contribute to it. So this year, my contribution to the conference is going to be a discussion on the alchemical classification of herbal medicine. And I think the way in which we as human beings classify herbs is an important consideration, because a system of classification is really, as humans, us kind of imposing some boxes around the plants as a means of organizing them, as a means of understanding them, seeing similarities, seeing differences. And really, ultimately, that system of classification affects how we're going to use them clinically and therapeutically. And we look all around the world, there's many different systems of classification. TCM classifies their herbs one way, Ayurveda another, the Galenic Greek tradition did it one way, Unani Tib, North American herbalism, right? All these systems really have a different way of organizing and classifying their remedies. And this has been of great interest to me over the years. And what I found is that the tradition of alchemy has a very unique take on how they classify and organize and understand their herbal medicine, because the way in which the alchemists classified plants wasn't necessarily based on things that we might think of in Western herbalism, like the herbal actions, or even their organ affinities, or their tastes, or their energetics. But the alchemists classified their herbs based on a plant's relationship to these greater, we might say, archetypal forces of nature that are pretty universally recognized amongst herbal traditions. We can think in terms of the elements of earth, water, air, and fire, and ether. In the Western alchemical tradition, we see a very unique classification model that uses the seven inner planets as a means of classifying plants. And what's unique about these approaches to classification is that it encompasses the plant in a very holistic manner. It's not just looking at how does that plant relate to us as humans, but it's looking at how does that plant relate to the wholeness of life and of creation and the cosmos and the earth. And through that, when we look at its relationship to a person, it relates physiologically to our physical health, but also translates up into the psychology of a human, and even into the spiritual attributes of the plants. And it really allows us to see the relationship between the physical property, the energetic property, and the spiritual or esoteric properties of the plant. So I'm going to be talking about that alchemical system of classification, and really sharing kind of some newer approaches that I've been taking to it, whereby I've been learning more about William Lasassier's approach to triune classification, whereby each herb is seen to be what we would think of as a builder, a neutral, or an eliminator to a particular organ system of the body. And as I've been working with this over the last number of years, I've come to realize that that approach actually is a great way to apply our understanding of this more alchemical way of classifying plants based on an elemental relationship or a planetary relationship. And so for people that are interested in learning a little bit more about the alchemical tradition, as it specifically relates to plants. This will be a really great introduction to that topic. And for folks that maybe are already interested in the alchemical path and spagyrics, you're going to get a little bit of a new perspective on how we might correlate plants to planets and to elements, and have a little bit of a deeper, what I think of a more deeper, a more sophisticated, a more refined approach to making those relationships. So that's going to be my class at this year's International Herb Symposium. I'm really excited. It's a class I've never taught before. So you're getting kind of fresh, my most fresh content here
Yeah.
in 2025. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So, for those that don't know, Lesassier, I don't know, is kind of this mythical character, who was around in the 60s when herbalism was just sort of starting to like reignite, and a lot of people that, you know, um, I certainly look up to David Winston, Rosemary Gladstar, just a whole host of people that um, uh, had interactions with him when he was living in, I think, New Mexico, and then ended up having an herb shop in New York. And uh, I guess, certainly had has left a kind of mysterious mark in the herb world. I certainly did not know him, but learned about him through Margie Flint, and then kind of going deeper with David Winston and what he teaches. So that's really cool that you're going to kind of um, merge all these teachings, right? Because I think what you're probably seeing is like there's some kind of synergy, right? And the overlay of all these, um,
Yeah.
uh, I don't know, what's the saying, like, all of these different pathways maybe leading to a similar destination.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a universality to these things, whether you're in India or China or Europe or North America. There's one earth, there's one water, there's one air, there's one fire. I see there being universal patterns in nature, and I think a lot of people tap into those patterns, and maybe they express them in a slightly different way. But if you really look at the core of it, it's like, they're talking about the same thing.
Mm.
And I think that triune system that Lassasia is talking about is definitely is one of those universal patterns. It's
Yeah,
very, very similar to even tridosha of Ayurveda, the three principles of alchemy, three treasures of Chinese medicine, all these little threefold triune patterns, right?
yeah,
It's
right. Yeah.
lines up with them pretty nicely.
Yeah,
So
and I kind of feel like, well, I don't know, obviously there's something to the power of three, but also
yeah.
3 points, and then there's, I think for me, like when I try and study information, or I like to get the source from three different places.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So
triangulate it,
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of, I guess, universal truths in that. And so yeah, super excited to have you come again. And I don't know, is there anything you want to share about, like, people who want to study with you or connect to your school? Like what,
Cool. Yeah.
I mean, I know you
Well,
have lots of different offerings, but
sure, yeah. Well, we have lots of free offerings, and I think that's always the best place for people to start. So if you just were to go to evolutionaryherbalism.com, we've got a lot of free content on there on our blog called The Plant Path. A lot of that content's also available on YouTube, on your favorite podcast streaming. Of course, we're doing daily stuff on Instagram and Facebook and all that, but really, going to the Plant Path is where you're going to get a lot more in-depth free materials there. And we also have our Spagyric product line, which is Natura Sophia Spagyrics. So yeah, that's where you can find us. We're gonna have booths there at IHS. So for those of you that want to learn more about what we're up to, check out our Spagyrics and hang out for a little bit. You can come to the vending area and come hang out at the booth, and that's probably where I'll be a lot of the time, unless there's I'll probably be in a lot of classes too, because it's rare that I get to come off of my mountain here and go interact with the herb community. So I'll probably
Yeah.
get to go take some classes myself too, which is always fun.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting, diverse group of teachers and um, two women coming from Colombia, one from Uruguay, and so there's, going to be different uh some different people than others are used to. So I think
Great.
that's kind of exciting too. And I think that's the kind of carrying on the vision that Rosemary put forth, which was to just bring all kinds of herbal traditions together, right? Kind of
Totally.
step out of your box and expose yourself to like a different way of thinking and seeing. And
Mm.
so she's got big shoes to fill, but I'm trying really hard. And of course
Well, and that's
she'll
how
be
we
there.
learn.
Yeah.
That's how we learn, like herbalist. I think that's how herbalist learns, by talking to each other and what works for you. How do you treat this? How do you approach this problem, this disease, this, and learning from, it makes me think of Paracelsus, Paracelsus, the Swiss-born alchemist in the early 1500s. I mean, he, like, at that time, to be a doctor, you just went to university, you were trained in the university, and that was it. And he trained at university, but he traveled all over and he learned from folk healers and barbers and midwives and all different people from all walks of life, all different kinds of healers. And he was an amazing physician. And I really, I try to be that way too, like eclectic in our approach and learning from everybody, and especially people that are, down in the weeds doing the work. It's always how we grow our knowledge, and that's a good way. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, think about Juliet de Barclay that lived with the gypsies and like studied as a veterinarian, but like really, traveled with the people living with the plants, right? And then bringing that, being able to document and keeping that knowledge alive.
Yeah.
And I think like Rosemary, she's still out there traveling, learning learning new things and wanting to experience new cultures, right? I mean, so I think that's what makes international so unique, is that it's really such a diverse um group of teachers. So I'm getting pretty excited. I'm getting pretty excited.
Gonna be a good one. I can tell already.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, thanks. Okay, great. Is there anything else you want to add? Or I think we hit some good notes. I mean, definitely I'm excited about your class. Um, kind of bringing these ghosts alive, it feels like a little bit, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a big part of my, I feel like a lot of my purpose in a lot of ways is really striving to preserve, reinvigorate a traditional approach to healing and to herbal medicine that I wouldn't say is lost per se, but I would say it's definitely on the fringe. It's been pushed into slight obscurity. And I think a lot of that might be because of the way in which the culture has evolved over time, and especially with the advent of the scientific revolution and a very rational, reductionistic, mechanistic way of thinking, and how that's influenced medicine. I think a lot of the things that I've focused on, especially in regards to alchemy, spagyrics, the practice of medical astrology, which is like one of those things where people hear that and they're like, ooh, I don't know, medical
Yeah.
astrology, that sounds really woo-woo. And it's like, well, yeah, that's the problem, is that it's been totally misunderstood
Yeah.
and totally relinquished and seen as false and not a valid approach. And yet it's an approach that's been used by physicians for hundreds, if not thousands of years effectively. It's like, well, it wouldn't have stuck around that long if it
Right.
didn't
Yeah.
work. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, let's take that and let's bring it into the modern context. Let's make it applicable to the modern herbal client, to the modern herbalist. Let's see how the traditional can be brought into the modern and still has validity and is a great way to help people out, because ultimately what matters is that the people in front of you asking you for help get the help that they need, that they get healed through the herbal medicine that we carry. And whether we're using a Ayurvedic mindset, a Chinese mindset, an eclectic mindset, an alchemical mindset, it doesn't really matter. So long as they get healed, that's the important part. As you said earlier, many pathways to the top of the mountain. It doesn't really matter what path we take, so long as we reach that peak, it's good. So anyways, thank you very much, Susan, for the opportunity to be a part of the International Herb Symposium again this year. It's always an honor to be there.
Awesome. Thank you.